All right. Hello, hello. Welcome to Journey to SEA 2025. This is Shelly and Edwards Byron here, your creative writing specialist. This morning, we're going to be talking about accident reports, we're talking about narrative drills, and we're moving on from poetry toward graphics. So, if this is your first session, then you've missed a bit because this is episode 25. But don't worry about it. The recordings are there on YouTube and on my Facebook page, Wood Coach Youth, so that you can view them at any time. So, if you've missed anything I mentioned in this session you want to know more about, then you can easily go back to the episodes and take a look at them. So we've covered so far, we've done all the basic skills for narratives. We've looked at all the basic skills for reports, and we've looked at nonfiction comprehension, fiction comprehension, and poetry. Plus, we've looked at different types of questions. We've looked at the structure of the exam. We've even looked at context clues so that if your child is having trouble with the vocabulary section of the comprehension, then you can check out those episodes as well. Thank you so much for those of you who are able to look at the live. I appreciate seeing, at least a one or a two, not, just me talking to the screen. And for those of you who are looking at the replays and the recordings, I see quite a number of people look at the recordings because I know it's an odd time, it's 11 o'clock ish during the day. So most people are at work or busy otherwise, but definitely if you go through the recordings and you have a question, feel free to just type it in the chat or you can message me directly. Find me on Facebook, Shelly Ann Edwards Byron, or you could message my Facebook page, Wood Coach Youth. If you want to contact me directly, you can WhatsApp me on 717-4993. So, welcome to today's episode. And let's see, let's get the slides up so that we can get ourselves going and see exactly what we're covering today. As usual, yeah, you know how it goes. It was up, now it's down. Now I have to figure out how to put it back up properly. All right, so nice. We got it up. There we go. So, closer look at accident reports. We're looking at finally kind of combining the narrative skills because even though we've been writing narratives for a little bit, we've been kind of focusing on the different skills within context. So now we're moving on to drills, and I want to talk to you a little bit about the drills and how you can put them together and what you really need to do in order to make the drills as meaningful as possible. And then finally we're going to review some graphics and talk a little bit more about graphics. Now that's the section that many students don't have too much trouble with, but there are one or two questions where if a student misses it they lose 2 marks. Remember the graphics, the grading with the graphics is a little bit different from the other comprehension sections where you have 7 questions, some with 2 marks, some with 1 marks. Altogether, you get 13. With the graphics section, you get 4 questions, each with 2 marks. So missing a question means missing 2 marks. And so we want to look at some things with graphics, just a few reminders, because I did an entire session on graphics previously. So well, I did several sessions actually, come to think of it. But the idea is we want to revisit these things ever so often so that students would be aware of what's going on, reminded of what they need to do to make sure they clean up with the graphics and get as many marks as possible. Students should not be missing marks with the graphics. There's a little bit, well, I would say less interpretation and so on required, and so students should be getting full marks with graphics. I know the poetry and the passage, they have little nuances and so on, but with graphics, it's a little bit more straightforward. So we want to make sure full 8 marks in that section. So let's get started with reminders for this week. So, again, if you're new to the program, what I do at the beginning of each session is highlight three things that I was reminded of during the week between sessions in my interactions with students and parents and teachers as we go about working on creative writing and comprehension. All right, so these are the things that kind of stood out to me this week. Learning to write well is about more than just responding to prompts and being graded. Now, I know the grades are one way that we can determine what level a student is in, but really and truly at this point, even though I do some grading right now with the standard fives, really and truly at this point, we're working on combining skills, we're working on spot checking, and we're really focusing on development of skills, not so much the grade just yet. So when January hits, of course, we would be in a more heightened mode, and grades and keeping the grades up would definitely be a thing. But for now, really our focus should be on what skills are we seeing challenges with and how we can review those skills. So even if you have to go back to basics from time to time, at this point, that is what you need to do right now to make sure that students have the foundation. Because when it comes to the drills, what you're doing is building speed and coherence with and clarity with the time. So it's not really about filling in skills or anything like that. You're building speed when it comes to drills. So we're looking at that, how to begin that process today. But I really just want to emphasize that at this point, we're still in the realm of let's see where the challenges are and how we can plug them. All right. And this is something that I've said before, the second one. If we want multisensory output, we must give multisensory input. Is something that I noticed, when students are asked to write and they're asked to write descriptive paragraphs, even if they do all kinds of exploration, many times parents and teachers focus a lot on what the student can see. So even when the teachers believe that they are, engaging students, they might show them a video or maybe even take them outside to look at the clouds and different things. Most of that, I would say more than 90% would be visual stimulation. Yet, when students are asked to write, they're asked to write about emotions, they're asked to write about tactile sensations, touch. When we say feel with fingers, um, where we're asking them to write about what they hear and smell and sometimes taste. And we're not exposing them to all of these things. So the idea really is that if you want multisensory output, meaning that very engaging sensory paragraph, then we have to give students that kind of experience as well. There are several different ways that you can do that controlled in the classroom, but for parents in particular, these are things that you can do at home and make sure students have that exposure to the entire breadth of senses and interaction. So, again, if we want multisensory output, we have to really consider what is the input. It cannot just be prompt and write, or, let's look at a picture and write. We do have to engage the other senses as well. And then finally, while learning about putting ideas together, students need detailed guidance. And so understanding how to give feedback for writing, it's important because students want to get the good grades. Most students, if you ask them, they have a goal, they want to go to certain schools, they want to get the good grades, even if they don't know where they want to go or the schools or anything. Mommy, daddy sorting that out. Mommy has that under control. But they want to know that they're doing well. But many times when it comes to writing, they don't. They don't know exactly how to do what they're being told. They might know what to do, so add in some more descriptions. But how do you do that? Okay, well, I show instead of tell. Well, okay, how do I do that? Well, you use expressions. Okay, what kind of expressions? I use figurative language. Okay, give me some examples. We do need to go into as many details as possible when it comes to expressing to students what to do and how to do it. And I know overall that is the area that many parents and teachers kind of have challenges with. And so I am when I do the professional development, I do cover feedback. But for some time now, I've been thinking about doing a session entirely on feedback and how to recognize certain things and give the effective feedback, because really that is what makes a difference. Students know they have to add description, but how do they do it? That's the detail. So we want to get down into those kinds of details. And I had a couple conversations this week that really made me understand that these are the things that really help students, but they're also in the realm of what both teachers and parents struggle with the most. So that's something that I'm going to put some attention to see how I could give a lot more assistance, making sure um, the parents and teachers understand. I think what I'll probably do is to um, critique um, a report and critique a narrative live online so that you could see the process that I go through in grading and identifying challenges, as well as sharing those challenges. So I could probably do one of those, and then so you could see what it is you'd be learning when I do that feedback session. So that's the plan. For those of you who are interested, feel free, send me reminders, because if you've been following the series at all, you would know that reminders sincerely help me. I am not troubled. Send me a reminder every day. It doesn't bother me because I do forget. Even when I have my own reminders and I have my own pop ups, I do forget. It's a thing. And so I have to manage that. And one of the ways I manage that is by getting external reminders. So don't think you're bothering me. Just note that I might not always answer you because I'm doing other things, but the reminders definitely work. All right. So let's get into our report writing. That is the first session. And let's take a look at accidents. Now, of course, at this point, we're combining skills. Last week we did incidents. We focused a bit on incidents. This week we're focusing on accidents. And what I want you to think about is being able to express details and actions clearly, step by step. And this is, I'm probably sounding like a broken record at this point, but this is one of the major challenges that I see. There are technically three. So, one would be vocabulary. Of course, students need to build their vocabulary. The other one would be the step by step, which is this. And the third one would be connecting the ideas. Like those are the three. So, we want to really pay attention to the content, and so we want to make sure that students can actually see the separation of steps, because sometimes we take it for granted that, you know, when something happens, it's just like one action. But when you really analyze it closely, you would see that there are different steps in the situation. Plus, if you have more than one person involved, then different people will be doing different things. And so those are the kinds of details. Um, the situation that I like to use as a reference is, well, I do two. One would be on a bullying incident, and the other one would be if a student fell. Now, in both instances, a student fell. I mean, what more detail can I say regarding the student fell? Well, where did they fall? What happened before? Paragraph 2. What happened during the time when they fell? What happened immediately after? We can actually break it up into beginning, middle, end. That's one aspect of it. If we're looking at the paragraph 3, what happened during the fall? Here is where we can add in lots of details that many students don't even think about. So let's say the student fell, they were walking down the steps and they fell. So some details. Going down the steps, were they at the beginning, or the middle, or near the end of the steps? When they fell, what actually happened? Did you notice what actually happened? You could add in some details. Maybe the student had a loose shoelace, and they you notice the loose shoelace, and before anybody could say, hey, your shoelaces aren't tied, next thing you know, they're going down the stairs. So they're going down the stairs. Do they just um feet buckle, whatever, and then they miss a step and they hit the stairs and stop? Or do they go down one or two steps? Do they reach for the railing? Do they reach for other students? Are they the only person going down the stairs? So you see how many details we can look at when it comes to the details in the paragraph for just somebody slipping and, you know, falling. So we have all these separate bits and details that we can put. And so what you really want to do is to get a list of accident prompts and have the student brainstorm details for each of these prompts and write them. So you don't just want to have them review, you want to have them write it out because you want to see and show them and give them all the ne- vocabulary needed to explain and express all of these things. Which brings us to point number 2, which is brainstorm formal vocabulary. That's a big deal. We always talk about reports being formal, and many times we want to give students a long list of vocabulary words. And even in my worksheets, we have the words, but they have to practice using them and using them in the past tense and in the correct way. And so, um, let's say we have a situation where some students, collided on the play field. There's a huge range of vocabulary words that can be used. So I actually, started making a list. Um, and so I would present once I have the list in a format that works. I'm going to share that with my standard 5 students. So I'm going to start putting together some sectioned vocabulary lists that they could use in their writing. So in my worksheets, I have a general list. And so now I'm going to go back and group them in different categories. It's a little bit challenging to do that because we're not saying that, okay, you can only use these words in an accident. You can't use it in an incident or anywhere else. That's why I haven't done it before. But, I would say maybe at least like about 10 words. If I give my students 10 words that might be unique to each of the different types of prompts. But the real thing is that different situations will create different requirements for prompts. And vocabulary. So it's not as simple to kind of create this master list. That is something that you can do while you're practicing with specific prompts, right? So where so we have definitely collision. Um, we have sequence of events, responded, assessed, like if you're assessing injuries, assisted, attended to. When we're talking about injuries, we can talk about injuries sustained. We can talk about a teacher doing an initial or preliminary assessment of injuries and then taking to the nurse or calling an ambulance. Um, at the end of everything, we can talk about teachers putting precautionary measures in place. We have preventative actions. We have approached, advanced, uh, let's see, impact. So lots of different words that we could kind of, you know, brainstorm and make sure that the students can actually use these words effectively within sentences and enhance the quality of the formal tone of their report by using the proper effective vocabulary. And that includes transition words and phrases. Remember, we need both. And so we want to have both the transition words and phrases. Um, let's see, let's get some transition words. And then we want transition phrases, just a few suggestions. I mean, there are some that you could use at any point, like at, prior to and all those kinds of things. But are there any that might feel a little more unique to the different type of report? All right, so let's see what we come up with. And guys, I want to tell you something. Now, of course, I like subsequently, consequently, not so much. Firstly, secondly, not at all. In standard five reports, firstly, secondly, those kinds of expressions, they really do come across like a lower level of writing. That's like standard two and three when you're talking, you're learning sequences and you learn first, second, third, and so on. That's appropriate at that level. It's fine. But once students understand sequencing, we need to level them up with their vocabulary. So I don't advise students to use first and second, firstly, secondly at all in their writing for the simple reason that it makes the writing sound as if it's a lower level than it should be. And so, as the situation unfolded following the incident, yeah, so we have a few, or following the collision, if we want to be a little bit more specific. So we have those, and we really want to do some brainstorming, We have written reports before, students have written reports at school, most. I would say most, because I know not everybody is writing at school. I've had students who, for the past 2 weeks, they haven't done any um like the creative writing at school. So that's kind of a challenge. So brainstorm some of these things, make notes, and look back at reports to see, what you've done before. Um, Look for different expressions. We're reviewing accident reports in detail again. So here's what you're doing this week. Um, we want to review the content. Make sure you have at least 3 to 5 actions or details that you can give for each section before, during, after. Then you want to review formal vocabulary and the transition words that would work really well with the accidents. And then you want to write a complete accident report. Now, at this point, you've written reports and you're putting things together. And so while we are not necessarily timing yet, you want to make a note of the time, how long it takes. because your aim is to get the actual writing of the report down to 35 minutes. Now, I know students are given 50 minutes, 50 minutes to complete the task. However, remember we need to do some planning and then we need to do review. And so between the planning and review, you want to allocate about 15 minutes. And so get students into the habit of writing the actual report in 35 minutes. So at this point, we're not like enforcing the time. So when the time is up, we cut them off and we just grade. We are making a note. So we're doing it with a timer and we're making note of how long it takes for each section. And then you would review content and you keep a note of that so that you could see how the student is developing their writing. So you allocate 5 minutes for the planning time, 35 minutes for writing, and 10 minutes for review. So if the 35 minutes runs a little into the review time, that's okay. But you don't want to spend only like 3 minutes with review. That's not going to be effective. You need a minimum of 5 minutes for review. Ideal would be 10 so that students can make the changes that are necessary. So, with the practice and with understanding the content, because that's what really takes a lot of time with students, yeah? They don't know what to write, the ideas aren't coming. And so that's why we plan first and we practice the planning so that the ideas could come and then we want to do the writing in about 35 minutes. So that's what you're working on this week for the report writing. And of course, to help, we have the 5 reports challenge, we have the 25 worksheets. I'm going to update these and, give some additional information, especially for these worksheets. Where you have the 25 prompts. I'll probably do a version 2 with an additional 25. So for those of you who already have this, you can get an additional 25 prompts. This one, I'm going to review it. I've been trying to review it, but it's going a bit slowly with the changes because it has what it needs to have in it, to be honest. The only thing I'm thinking of maybe changing would be like the report samples that are in there. I might swap them out, and that's probably what I'll do. But so if you don't have either of these, both are exactly what you need, but one or the other you would have a good start with going through. If you have them, there's a worksheet. Actually, there's a booklet on vocabulary, separate booklet on vocabulary with a list. I think it's about 50 something words, formal words that you could start working with, and then you can do your own additions to that. And this one, of course, you have the prompts and they help you with the order and the planning to get students' planning time down to 5 minutes or less. Right? Okay, so that's it with reports. Let's move on to narratives. Now, I know students have been working on narratives at school. Many students are already writing full narratives, some doing practice already. At the very least, this week, most students would be starting with practice papers, practice tests if they aren't already doing that. So we're looking at combining the narrative skills. So before, as we were writing full narratives, we were spot checking. Now we're looking at how everything as a whole work together to create the narrative that you want to create. And so we want to review things like plot. We need to see that beginning, middle, end. We need to see the rising action and so on. And we've spoken extensively about that. And we will keep talking about it because these are some of the major areas that I see students have challenges. So getting that rising action. And part of getting that rising action, as we discussed a couple weeks ago and even last week, we mentioned about emotions, dealing with the character's emotions and have that emotional response really heightens the rising action because Yesterday I was talking to a student, and um, we were doing a review. So with my group classes, twice for the term I've started we're doing one-on-one. So we do group sessions where we write and we do some drills, and I give written feedback, and then we have that one-on-one session where I meet with each individual student and go through their writing. So we do narratives separately and reports separately. So we have two one-on-one sessions. Now, in this story, the well, the main character is in a house that's supposed to be haunted. Of course, he doesn't believe that, so he's investigating to see, to get to the bottom of the matter because he don't believe it's haunted. And while he's there, the door slams behind him without anybody touching it, and then um a black gooey thing comes through one of the paintings. And in his reactions, he said, um, he walked to the other room. So I pulled brakes on him right there. I said, hold up, hold up. Um, Let me just get this straight. The door slams behind you, and you see this thing come through a painting, and you walk to another room. I mean, if it was me, I probably it would have looked like I was floating. I would be running so fast, like total freak out, screaming, the whole works. Or, it might be so much, I might have just fainted because it was like just so overwhelming. So there are lots of different emotional reactions, but it doesn't come naturally when students are writing. These are things that we have to practice. And these are things we have to point out to students and say, hey, okay, here's what we do. And mind you, when I told him that, I didn't just leave it and said, okay, write something more exciting. No, I went through with him step by step what I would have written and how I would have felt if I was in that situation, and gave him some example sentences of how it could be written using some of the ideas that he came up with as well. And so, with that kind of combination now, the next time I see this student's writing, I'm looking for certain things because now I know that he knows what to do because I showed him, I gave him examples, including vocabulary to use. And this is where the descriptions come in, where we use the what we call vivid verbs. I know lots of people have this Banish Boring Words book where you get lots of words that you could choose from. But at the end of the day, students still have to choose the words and expressions to match the situation. And so if this is happening, this is like level 7 kind of thing. I'm still at 7 because it could get worse. We could get cornered, which is pretty much what happened in the rest of the story. We could get cornered by this thing and think is gonna engulf us and all of that. So it could get worse. So we're at level 7. If we're at level 7, ain't nobody walking. Nobody is walking. That's way too calm and casual for a level 7 drama, right? So we want to match. We want to match. And that's the emotions, thoughts, everything is matching. Then we have to think about setting, showing time and place. So notice I put show time and place. We're not telling, we have to show. How do we show? With descriptive words and phrases that appeal to senses. What does that mean? Students know the words in terms of they know that they have to give descriptions, but how do they do it? That's what we show them. So we have to do a little review of all of these things. Conflict. Many times we have one conflict and it's solved so easily, we wonder, was it really a problem if it solved so easily? How does it develop? How do we get that? So a few weeks ago, I spoke about the problem solution path. That problem solution path is not just I have a problem, I solve it, and then I rejoice. No, I encounter the problem, I react to the problem, I say things, I have emotions, I do things in that reaction. Then I get some help to solve the problem. Then I go through the process of solving the problem, which would be like 3 to 5 actions that I engage in to actually come to this solution. Even though I know what to do, it's not supposed to be so easy to get it done. Like, he walks into the other room and then he flips the light switch and then the creature disappears and he decides, you know what, too much for me here, and I go back home. Now, of course, the student didn't write that. His story was like pretty awesome. But in a case like that, we don't want to just have that's too easy. So we have to flip the light switch and nothing happens. Maybe it flickers and then dies. We end up in the corner and the thing is coming at us, and out of the corner of our eyes we see there's a window in the room. So now we're going to try to jump through the window, but we have to dash past the creature. We want step by step, step by step, right? Piece by piece details. We don't just solve it easily. So there's a problem solution path. It's not just problem solved, we go home. Not that simple, right? And so we have to really pay attention to the conflict. And then the theme, which is something that we don't often mention, I call it lesson learned. I talk about the lesson learned all the time. The theme is the umbrella under which the lesson learned comes. That's like, what's the moral of the story? What's the focus of the story? Are we talking about not doubting people when they tell us things? Are we talking about becoming brave? Are we talking about caring for friends? Are we talking about being obedient? Are we talking about whatever the concept is? That would be the theme, and the lesson would be related to that. So if we're talking about somebody told us it was haunted, we don't believe them, we call them a liar, and we go and we investigate, and then we realize, I can't explain all of these things. Then the theme is about doubt and belief, and then the lesson would be just because I have not experienced it doesn't mean it's not real. Or it could be um just because, well, we can't explain everything. Some things are beyond explanation. So there are different lessons that we could learn from this idea of belief and doubt related to these kinds of things, right? And then there's the whole circular storytelling concept that I mentioned. We spoke about the cliffhangers and the fact that we really want to stay clear of those. And so we want to make sure that we plot the story before we write, because that makes our circular storytelling perfect. So then we want to have this lesson. So we get the lesson. When we're plotting, we're doing the quick plot where we focus on conflict and the lesson because we know that we have to react anyhow, right? But this is after some practice. So students, now we want to write the lesson of not everything could be explained, and just because I didn't experience it before doesn't mean that it's not real. So how can we make that into circular storytelling? Well, in the beginning of the story, somebody could mention it to me and I could say, nah, you lying. You don't know what you're talking about. You believe in all kind of stupidness. And, we make fun of the person or we ignore their advice because we don't think it's real. So we doubt, we don't believe. Um, and then in the ending, we say, woo, you know what? There are some things that I really can't explain. There isn't an explanation. So sometime in the beginning, we would say there must be an explanation, and I will show you. I'm going to go there and I'll prove to you that you're wrong. There is a scientific explanation for everything. And then you go there and you can't. And then at the end, you say, okay, so maybe there isn't a scientific explanation for everything. And so that connects with what you said at the beginning. That is an example of that whole circular storytelling. Um, sorry, the circular storytelling that brings out the completeness of the narrative. So these are the things you do quick review, and then we have to work on these spelling, punctuation, past tense, subject verb agreement, transitions, paragraphing, couple other what we call mechanical aspect of the sentences, the nuts and bolts of actually putting it together. And so pay attention to where the child is having the most challenge so that you can actually create strategies for addressing these. Now, we've spoken about some of this before, so you can go back to previous episodes, but definitely this can cause a loss of marks. It's not going to cause as much of a loss of marks as content, missing content, but you're definitely not going to hit your 18 to 20 if any of these are a problem, right? And so here's what we do this week. We want to review our notes on narrative skills. So we're going back to plot, do a quick check with the plot. How do you plot? What are you plotting? What are the elements of the plot? And so on. And you want to go into some detail. You don't want to just hear, okay, well, I have exposition, rising action, falling action, resolution. What is exposition? What is rising action? What details do you put? Rising action has a few steps, which is why I created that 12-point plot so that you could go through the steps so students know exactly what to write, where to write it. If they have any kind of doubt, they could memorize that and then they'll be good to go. We want to review strategies and challenges. What are the challenges that you're seeing? Are we missing character description? Are we missing setting description? Are we missing, do we have improper punctuation or past tense in certain places? What are the challenges? We're creating strategies for dealing with them. So for punctuation, you might want to, like, create a system that they can double check. For descriptions, I created a really interesting, I call it interesting, but so far it's been working with the students. Um, because many students they don't include effective descriptions, whether character or otherwise, in their stories. And so I created an acronym. I call it flavor, FLAVOUR. So the F stands for feel with fingers, because we're talking about tactile touch. L would be listen, and that would be sounds and stuff in the environment. A would be act, which would be actions, movements, so it's kind of thing. The V would be to visualize. So what do you see around you? And we have all the different ways that we can describe what we see. O would be observe odors, so we're adding in smells. The U would be to uncover tastes, and then the R would be to react and respond, which is where the emotions come in and so on. So we have this wonderful um, spread of a reminder. And so what I do is that I teach my students, for those who have that struggle, they put the acronym at the top of the page as they're writing, and so they can check because they've already memorized the acronym, they know what it means, and so they can check back. And this is for when they're doing their writing, the actual writing, and then for the review. Do I have this? Do I have that? And so it's a really quick way to check that. So I'm creating a worksheet with that has all of that information, different spreads and stuff, and prompts to practice with and all those things. That's going to be a little bit because I have to adjust some stuff, but you know how it goes. If you want to get early access to it, just send me a WhatsApp message so that I'll have you on record so that I know once it's out, I could send you information, right? And of course, so this week you're going to do that timed writing, but again, we're not like strict with the time to say, well, okay, time is up, put down your pencils, no more writing. What we're doing is we're kind of documenting how long it takes to do certain sections, and then so you could tweak it and see, okay, the plotting is taking a little too long. Let's see if we could get that down to 5 minutes or less. So you focus on that. The writing, you're taking 45 minutes to write. That's not giving you enough time for reviews. What can we do to cut down there? And so those are the things. So you want to see how long it takes. So you're getting a sense of the time at this point. Because, like I said, even though we're aiming toward the drills, we're not doing strict drills until maybe January. So for now, we're starting the student into the habit of completing according to a time, and then you gradually reduce the time if the time is longer than it ought to be, and then you create the skills and strategies to help them reduce the time so that when they get to the drills, they would have already have some practice with that and now be able to really express themselves effectively. Because when it comes to time, not finishing on time could mean any number of things. Took too long to plot. Um, took too long to write, couldn't match the ideas together, got stuck on climax, or couldn't figure out a lesson learned, or it could be anywhere along the process. And that's why you want to work with the timing now and see where the challenges are so that you can create the strategies to deal with it. Because in addition to being able to write well, remember the students are preparing for an exam. So we're looking toward skills and strategies for that exam. And of course, with the 7 stories, you have samples. If you don't already have a copy, definitely get a copy. It's just 145 is digital. You can bring it up on the computer. You don't have to print everything or anything at all, actually, because you could just bring up the prompts on the screen and have the student choose one, and then they could work on their own paper. Even though in the worksheet I do have space, and so you could do that, but you don't have to if you don't want to. Um, if you want to print one of the sample stories so that you could mark on it and make notes and circle things, but you don't have to print at all. So it's really versatile in that way. There's a section on descriptive writing and so on. And so you have pretty much what you need here. I am actually also building out this one. I'm testing it out with my students. And so, based on feedback, I have a couple changes to make so that you can get access to this. Um, Once you message and say that you're interested, of course, I could send it. Um, I'll make the change a little bit quicker because remember at the beginning I mentioned, the little um, accountability. That's the word that we use. That helps a lot. So we have this, and then I'm also doing one for the descriptive writing with the word flavor with the acronym so that students can really explore. Because again, we want to really have students exploring the their senses and different things. And so, how do we put that in writing? What's a strategy that we could use? Um, I'm also working on one for character description because that's another area. So the worksheets are coming. Um, they're a little bit slower than I would like, and I'm sure you wish that they were out already. But they're coming, and certainly by the end of this month, I'm going to have a few more because I'm actively working on them this month. All right, so let's see. Time for us to move on to comprehension. And in this section, we're looking at graphics. So we've looked at fiction passages already. We've looked at non-fiction passages already and poetry. And so this is a rounding out of the different types of texts because there are four. Two you get always. You always get a graphic, you always get a poem, but then with the passage, the choices are between fiction or non-fiction. Right? So what's up with graphics? What do we need to review at this point? Now, like I said at the beginning, you want that students maximize their marks at graphics. We want to get full 8 marks. We should not be losing any marks at graphics. Reason being is that the graphics are quite different from the others because the other types of texts are very word laden. So lots of words with the passage, words and words with the poem. But with the graphics, we actually get images, and our focus is really on the visual elements of the thing. And so once students know what to look for and what each visual element represents and how it works for the graphic, then they're pretty much good to go. So that's something that we need to pay attention to. So visual elements include layout. How are things positioned and why are they positioned that way? Images. Do we have images? What images do we have? Why are the images included? Are they relevant? Are they effective? Text. Now, this is the part that a lot of people have some challenges with because when we see text, we think of words. But even on the screen here, you notice that these are in a different color and they're all capitals, whereas these below have initial caps for the first word, but the whole thing is not in caps. Now, what's the reason for that? We kind of take these things for granted, but I mean, as adults, but as children, they're now learning to interpret these cues that guide to help interpret meaning. And so they need to know why. So this is in all caps. It's also larger font and a different color because it's a heading. And I want readers to recognize the heading. So I put it in all caps, bold, different color, larger size font. What so there are reasons for these things. It's not random. There are reasons. Why do we underline? You know, why do we put things in caps, etc., etc.? So text, the visual elements of text, something to pay attention to. Purpose and audience are very important in graphics. Students need to understand what is the purpose of a graphic, how to identify intended audience. You get questions about those things. And then finally, what the type of graphic, because we have a few. Now, for the most part, I think in the last few years, we've seen mainly advertisements and flyers and posters, things like that. But previously, students would have gotten flow charts, and there are lots of different types of graphics in the what you call it, in the specimen papers. You can see things like labels and food labels, all of those kinds of things you can get with a graphic. And so the idea is, where is everything positioned, layout? Why are they in that way? Are there images? How do the images work? What does the text contribute in terms of the way the text is formatted, as well as the information the text gives? So you want to deal with all of these as you look at the unique features of graphics. So um we want to deal with, I think The areas that students get challenges would be interpreting the visual elements of the text, as I mentioned, identifying purpose and audience, and adding their own elements. Because you can get a question: what image would you add to enhance the graphic? Would you add anything else to enhance the graphic? You do, there is a possibility that you can get questions like that. So, so what we call typography, um, the visual elements of the text, the layout, where the words go. We have things circled and highlighted and etc. etc. So what we want to do then this week, we're going back to basics with the graphics for a little bit, just to make sure all of these things are clear. And so you want to, I mean, newspapers are like awesome. Flyers, I don't know, this time of the year, you're going to get tons and tons and tons. Some about Carnival, some about Christmas, um, some about, well, we just passed Halloween. You could probably still be getting some of those. You have All Souls and All Saints. We have, different pop-up markets all over happening. So we have flyers on Facebook and all those kinds of things. So that's like in terms of those types. We want to also include things like flow charts and content, table of contents, and so on. So we want to look at different options as well in terms of we just want to read and discuss the graphics. Like what do you see? Why do you think this is the case? We're not writing anything yet. We're just reading and discussing. And then we want to get our hands on some practice tests, some past papers, and look at the questions. And then we want to complete a graphic comprehension. So based on all of that, let's see where are we with graphics. And so again, no timing or anything, just completing the graphic comprehension. And so from there, next week, when we continue our review of graphics, we're going to do a little bit more on questions and how to answer the questions. So for now, we're doing that check. What can you do based on the discussions that we've had? Let's see, are you getting full marks? And even when we're getting full marks, we can't take it for granted that that means full marks in everything. Remember, there are different types of graphics. So you probably want to get your hands on a few different types of graphics, right? You can go through the past papers. Now, like I said, for the most part, we have flyers, advertisements, and posters. We do have, I think the 2019 had a flowchart, but you want to get the variety. So you get your hands on the past papers so you can get a hold of the actual exam. And then I have also some passages that you could work on. I am desperately working on completing a few more of these. I was hoping to have them done last month, but then a couple things happened that threw me off timing. So we're back on to working on these. So pretty soon we'd have a couple other options with these. But what I do give, I also provide the answers and explanation for the answers so that you get it's a learning point while you're practicing. It's not just it's wrong, um, go fix it. It's like this is why this is the correct answer. This is how you look for the correct answer of these kinds of questions, right? And so that is, yep, that brings us to the end of our time together. Ooh, and I'm doing pretty good. I'm actually exactly at the 1 hour mark. So, yeah, pretty good today. So we looked at accident reports. We looked at that process of combining skills with the narratives, and we reviewed the graphics. And so students are doing the practice in between. But again, remember, we're still working on um, putting things together, right? And so later on for the comprehension, we're going to start doing like a full practice as opposed to separate, because right now we're still learning how to, go into detail in each one. So that is the end of our session today. Thank you so much for those of you who were able to stick out the entire hour. If you missed bits in the beginning, don't worry, the recording is going to be there. It's on YouTube, Wood Coach Limited, and it's on my Facebook page, Wood Coach Youth. It should be, it's in a link in SCA Peacefield, because Facebook does not allow you to stream into groups anymore. but but you have more than two places, because it's also on my website. If you want to go there, it's on the website. Everything is there for you. And feel free to ask questions. Send me a WhatsApp message, 717-4993. That is, let me put it back here for those of you who are visual. It's to the bottom here, 717-4993, so that you have there the number. And so that is, send me a WhatsApp message. I can't promise that I can answer a call. Many times I'm in class, or I'm marking papers or creating the worksheets. I wouldn't be able to take a call at that time, but send me a WhatsApp message. When I have the time, I'll respond to you. And I can even get my assistant to respond to you depending on what it is you need. If you need me directly, then sure, I will try to answer questions as best as possible. For the most part, what I try to do is to answer questions that I get during the lives, so that I think if you have the question, lots of other people will have it too. So as many people would benefit as possible. All right. So that is it. We are at the end, and I sincerely do appreciate you. Imagine 25 episodes in, and we're going all the way up to the week before the exam, so that I would be here to help you all along the way. Thank you so much again. And so let's say goodbye, and I'll see you next week. Take care, everybody.